I sound like the old grandpa now. It's like, these kids these days.
You should have gray hair.
But I did the same. Thank you, appreciate it. I do. Talking of the hair, though, we have the 3 stages of.
It's
I will.
The 3 stages.
talk about quitting.
This is Pod Have Mercy. Today on Pod Have Mercy, like, subscribe, smash the 5-star button.
Smash the 5s.
This is the thing we're learning. You have to
have any discount
unapologetic. Yeah, you get a coupon for Shipley's Donuts. We got Shipley's and Southwells today. Wonderful Houston opportunities for everybody. So so today Matt and I are joined by my good friend Chris Kolkhorst. And Chris is doing his day job, managing director at Higginbotham.
That's right.
And that's my understanding, insurance, financial, HR.
A little bit of everything, basically. Yeah, if there's an individual or a small business, medium-sized business that has insurance needs, we have people that offer those products and try to convince them to use you instead of the next guy. But yeah, that's the career I chose after being a failed minor league baseball player.
Well, and so
awesome.
Chris also played he was a member of the 2003 National Championship Rice baseball team. He was drafted by the San Diego Padres in 2004. So play a little. Did ever make it to the big leagues or
Double A?
Double A. That's good.
So I mean, you're doing a great job. Do you want me to talk? Or?
No, this is good. This is what Google. We're gonna see when I hit the wall here on Google. It's gonna get. It's like, oh no, I didn't do that.
You're just running through all my material.
Well, no, we got stuff to talk about. So yeah.
Well, this is a good story. So I was very fortunate to go to Rice, and I hit it at the right time. Where Rice has had some success prior to my class of players, so big names like Lance Bertman, Jose Cruz Jr.
Wow.
And they got to Omaha, but weren't able to win it all. Anyway, we did won the national championship 2003, my junior year. We had 4 guys get drafted in the first round. So as a result of that, there was a lot of scouts in the stands watching those pitchers, and so all of the position players got drafted. Well, fast forward, my wife and I went to high school, but we did not date through college. We went on a few what I thought amazing dates. It's Valentine's Day. Let's talk about love. So I really thought we should have dated in high school. She did not. And so she went to the University of Texas. I went to Rice. We reconnected at the end of our senior year. Rice has a finals break and a rule where you can't play for a week, and we reconnected then. Anyway, get drafted, go play minor leagues. We get engaged my first year, and she comes to spring training with me, and not the first thing, but she realizes real quickly, she goes, I thought you were going to make more money. I said, what, that $800 a month minor league salary doesn't impress you?
This uniform's awesome, though, right?
And all the chicken wings you can eat.
People give their left leg to play this game. So, yeah, I got to Double A, and I hated it. It was a good opportunity, thankful to be able to do it, but I made the decision that I would try to see if this Rice degree was worth something. I didn't want them telling me I wasn't any good at 32, so I made that decision at 24.
Yeah, well. So your wife's Anne Marie.
That's it.
2 beautiful kids, Coy and Sydney.
Coy and Sydney. So Coy's 15 and Sydney is 13. 2 opposite children.
That's always the case.
Yeah.
And one of the things I wanted you to come on and talk about your story and all this, but you also, and I've worked with Jeff, who produces our podcast here. You started a podcast about a year plus ago, I think, because I remember us talking about it.
Right.
And it's called Gritmen.
That's it.
And your nickname in college was Gritman.
That's right.
And what I'm fascinated to talk about, and I'll tell you why I think we're really interested in it, is that you say your podcast is dedicated to the preservation and advancement of grit, something you believe is on the verge of extinction. And so you have these interviews, you talk with a lot of folks about grit, whether it's in culture, news, sports, a lot of sports stuff, which makes a lot of sense. But how we can highlight grit and how that trait comes into practice. And in your recent guests, I've just looked, you had an entrepreneurial, a wine owner. It must have been when you traveled to Napa. See, this is how you write those things off. That's right. So really it was smart. Business. Yeah, do a little business. Grant Long. You've also had Houston Astro World Series champ Lance Berkman on for a couple episodes. You've had PGA champion, Ryder Cup hero Hal Sutton, former Astros manager Phil Garner, a lot of others. And so it's interesting. We're going to talk about these. We come back to. I'm just trying to give people an introduction here. But one of the things that we've been talking about so far this year as we've started back is a lot about mental health. And actually we had Dr. Kitty Harris from Texas Tech and Addiction Recovery, who we spent last week or 2 weeks ago talking about resiliency.
Yeah.
She's actually done this scientific study on resiliency.
Brain.
So I thought, man, this fits so good, because what I want to hear from you is, what is grit
Yeah.
and why is it important?
Perfect. So I created a nickname for myself at Rice as a joke, Gritman, and Gritman. And it was kind of a joke, but I wanted to be known as a teammate or a hard-nosed player, someone that could be trusted. I'd sacrifice for the team, whether that meant diving for a ball, sliding in hard, breaking up a double play, getting hit by a pitch. I wasn't the biggest guy, but I wanted to use every ounce of talent and ability I had. And so being a gritty player. That's the serious side. The joke was that none of my teammates wanted to call me Gritman. And so I created a nickname for myself, and it was just kind of an ongoing joke until we were about to go to Omaha in 2003. I had two teammates in particular that didn't like the name because they said, a Gritman, at that time, I had hair, and I think I had some highlights. And and I didn't dip snuff because in their mind, a Gritman had to chew tobacco, so I didn't fit the mold because it took a few dips and I would throw up every time, so it wasn't for me.
You weren't Red Man, you were a Grit Man.
Exactly. I'm like, come on, listen, let me define what this Gritman is. So anyway, I made a deal with them after a few cold beverages before we went to Omaha. I said, look, if we go to Omaha and win it all, y'all have to call me Gritman for the rest of your life. And I mean, we're just some dumb college kids, and they're like, yeah, we won it all, I'll call you whatever you want. So lo and behold, we go and we beat University of Texas, and we beat Stanford in the finals, and we dogpile, and then I find those two guys and I say, what's my name? And they're like, Gritman. So fast forward 20 years later, and it was during COVID. We have a place in Florida, and I'm sitting on the beach, and I'm thinking the world's going to end, probably like a lot of people, and all my clients are going to go out of business. What am I going to do? And I got this idea that I think I'm just going to come up with a men's magazine, and I'm going to talk about hunting and fishing and being a good dad and best employee or boss you can be, and maybe barbecue or bourbon and golf. And my wife's like, that is the dumbest idea I've ever heard. There are magazines for all those things. I'm like, yeah, but they're individual. No one's covering all those things. Anyway, she goes, why don't you do a podcast? And I'm like, a podcast?
It's a new magazine.
I was like, I don't even know what that is. And kudos to you, saw you at the club, and I said, hey, Pastor John, or Rev, I think, said, you got a podcast. I don't know anything. Can you connect me with somebody?
And I said, I can connect you with someone.
I know a guy.
And you did, yeah.
I know a guy.
Who knows how to do this.
And
Jeff, producer
Then
Jeff.
I had a guy, and he started sending me Amazon links, and you buy this and you buy that, and there you go. For $2,500, you can have a podcast, folks. There's not really barriers to entry. Then you got to start talking, and then you got to hear your voice, and then you got to edit, and then you got to get someone to come on. And anyway, so that's how the grit. So where does grit come in? So 20 years later, it was not about grit, man. I thought collectively in society, in the world, we need more grit. We need more strong men. And I wanted to find unique stories of grit and just talk about it. And so started as an idea and kind of got some momentum. We've done 12 episodes, and we're about to do season 2. So it's been fun.
Great. So I was just looking some things up. One person defined it as passion or perseverance, stick-to-itiveness, this nagging conviction that keeps you pressing on when it seems easier to get back. People, get back on the horse and you fall off, kind of thing. But in your podcast, in interviews, you've been able to interview some amazing people. So far, as you think about how you understand grit and resiliency and all these sort of things, I'm curious, what have you learned from your guests and your conversations about grit that you didn't know before you had the conversations? Any of those conversations stand out to you where the light went on and like, I really learned something from this guy or this or whoever?
Yes, the first 3 guests I had on, it was interesting. They all had a paper route as a kid. And so as I'm doing this, I'm trying to look for common denominators or what's a future predictor of success or grit. And so I was like, dang, I should have made my kids have a paper route. Then I think every paper's out of business. I don't know. But a lot of them are continuous learners, and so they just very curious by nature, and they're whether it's reading books or listening to podcasts or showing up at Sunday for a sermon, they want to be fed, and their brain's working. So they didn't reach a point where they said, I know it all, I'm going to stop. It's getting up every day and trying to get a little bit better. Whatever you may be working on, being a better dad, being a better husband, be a better golfer, whatever it is. Some passion that you can pursue and try to get a little better at.
So that continual improvement seems to be a part of one of the characteristics. Interesting, when we talked to Dr. Kitty Harris, she explained to us this thing called structured style, which is a big part of resilient. Resilient people have a structured style about them.
Right. And which basically is that there's kind of a flow to their day, that like where you might have trauma or something bad that happens, but then you kind of like the importance of making your bed every day. You know, who was it, the 5-star general that kind of did that
wrote
college.
a book called Make Your Bed.
Yeah, Make Your Bed. You know, that's the starting off saying, there's things I'm going to do every day that just kind of create a rhythm that then I do.
That lead into something else.
Yeah.
Like you were talking about being a part of this F3 fitness boot camp thing. God bless you. That's great. I'll be dreaming about you every morning.
5:30.
But that's something that you start your day's accountability, and that leads into something else, right? It leads into another.
Yeah. Well, I think it's knowing your weakness too. So it's you have to be honest with yourself, and like if I don't tell someone I'm going to show up and say I'm going to be there at 5:30, well, then I may have another glass of wine the night before, or I may stay up watching whatever's on Netflix, instead of just knowing, all right, I have to get up. I'm going to be there because I said I was going to be there. And so that's a big deal, I found.
That's an important point, too, because if you have that kind of structure, then you're more disciplined the night before going to bed.
Yes.
That's exactly what you said. And that becomes a part of your structure, which I think leads to resiliency as well. So in your interviews and your podcast, what's been your favorite? I don't want to put you on the spot because they're probably all your favorite. They're all your children.
That's right.
But which has stood out to you where you just really like, this was awesome, this conversation or this person and what they said, or something that really just...
I'll give you a few. So the first one, I guess it was my first episode I've ever done. You probably remember, you don't know how it's going to go, and you prepare, and then you get in this, and sometimes they give you a 2-word answer to a question you thought was gonna be great. Then you're scrambling. Oh no,
our teaser for the season,
right? But Coach Graham was great.
Expand on that, please?
Yeah. So Wayne Graham was the legendary coach at Rice, and he was old school, and so he was from that generation that he didn't tell you he loved you. Right? I mean, and you could sense it every once in a while, but his way of showing his affection was to yell at you, and so he made us tougher. Playing for him, we feared him, but we also respected him, and it was neat. So when I'm interviewing, and I'm still somewhat scared of the guy because he used to make me feel this big when I played for him, but I got to ask questions. I never asked about his childhood because I just wanted him to write my name in the lineup. And so to be able to have that conversation when he was in his 80s now, and to reflect back and to see what made him who he is was neat. Lance Berkman was cool.
He's a funny guy.
He's funny. He's a great interview. You should get him on. He'd do it. Yeah. But I had to apologize to him because I think Lance gets a bad rap because he's so funny and charismatic and he's a jokester. It's easy to think that he didn't work hard. Like his success was just
natural
God
talent.
gave it to you.
Yeah,
Like,
just showed up.
Right. And so I can't relate to you because God blessed you with a beautiful left-handed swing, and now you're an all-star. But he showed that success rarely happens by accident. There's a reason.
That's actually a great point, because there was something else I read, and I don't know if I made a note about it. Oh, yeah, I did actually. Somebody wrote something about talent, smarts, being at the right place in the right time are all important, but they're not enough. Mm-hmm. And what this person said is grit actually may be the most critical and crucial element. Because I've known people who've had all the talent in the world, but very little drive.
Right.
And they'll do well, but man, they could do so much better. It's like you're leaving a lot on the table.
For sure.
Yeah. It's almost like you'd rather, like when I'm around folks that exude grit, I'd rather be around somebody with grit than talent. Or at least be on their team. You know what I mean? Be connected to them in longer work, because I figure a person with grit, we're going to figure it out, right?
Sure.
We're not gonna quit. We're in it. Our hands are in it
And
together.
you're gonna be honest with each other.
Yeah.
Hey man, I screwed that up. That one's on me. Let's do better. Let's not do that again.
Yeah.
All right. And
Yeah.
or hey, I think you can do this a little better, and you're not gonna get your feelings hurt because probably coming from a genuine place, right? Because we're collectively trying to achieve something.
Right. That's right.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Talent is great, but I mean, if you just keep going, getting a little better, a little better, a little better, you can win the race.
That's what you always see about these great athletes, like Tiger Woods, LeBron James, Michael Jordan, whatever. I mean, they have all the talent in the world, but their work ethic.
Oh yeah.
Like Tiger Woods is famous. There was a story about years and years and years ago. He was walking through, and John Daly was holding court in the locker room at like mid-morning, drinking beers and smoking cigarettes. And Tiger's got his workout going to the gym, and Daly's like, "What are you doing?"
Right.
And Tiger was like, "If I had as much natural talent as you do, Daly, I wouldn't have to work so hard." And the point he was making is John Daly was immensely naturally talented.
Yeah.
But the difference in the way they approached what they did was very different.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, what is it? I read one of Tiger's books. His dad had him at 3 months strapped in a high chair, watching him hit balls. And then at a year, he was hitting balls. I mean, it gets into the muscle memory and neuroscience, but you have to repeat something so many times before it becomes natural. And Tiger was so far ahead of his peers at an early age, they were having to catch up with him. But it wasn't. I mean, he combines both. Natural talent and grit are a pretty good combination.
But that works in one domain, like with his sports, but not so much in some of the character aspects of his own life that he ended up being able to, needing to work on. So I wonder how grit gets integrated into character, and so there's some grit, there's like natural athletes or folks that have to work hard. I'm just wondering, like raising kids that may not go to Rice or may not be in the NFL, but you want to stand in front of things that say, I'm not going to give up. Yeah. So how do you teach?
That's a good point, because it's a lot of times we think of it as athletes.
Yeah.
Right.
And I learned grit in wrestling in high school. I would have never taken that way. It taught. I think
Sports
athletics
teaches
is
that.
good.
But I played football and baseball in high school, and those lessons, I didn't continue on into college, but those lessons stick with me forever.
Yeah.
I mean,
No, good point. We're a sports obsessed culture. Like we love sports, but it's so a lot. It's easy to just pull examples, but yes, there's just everyday examples of grit. And I mean, in business, I've personally got sued a couple times. I guess didn't make me a bad guy. Sometimes people bully you and try to use the court system to get what they want. I had to show some grit. Learned a lot of lessons. Lost the remaining hair I had. We don't have to get in the details there, but I mean, you brought up children, and so I'm having an interesting debate right now. Our daughter is 8th grade, and she's going to be going to high school next year. Been a competitive gymnast. That's all she ever wanted to do. Couldn't get her to play any other sport, and she's probably could go and get a Division II scholarship. But she's very smart, and I asked her, "Is that something you want to do?" "No, Daddy, I don't." I said, "Okay, well, let's look at another sport you can play to be a part of something that's cheerleading is a natural fit, and tryouts are in a couple weeks." Well, she doesn't want to quit gymnastics, and so sometimes I think it's okay to quit. Right? I think it's an educated, or it's just a decision. You're not. I want her to finish out the season.
Yeah.
But then it's time to do something else.
Yeah. Knowing when a season is over, a time in your life is over is important too. I wonder, like learning to teach kids that you can do hard things, right? That often we try to take the difficulty off of our kids so that they can run farther, higher, where it's actually like being able to be in a family where the message is we can do hard things. is
it's okay
a
to not
part-
be good at something.
Yeah, right. But and isn't that grit? Is sticking with it until you get better?
Yeah, and I think
part of it.
enjoying the process. And I mean, and I mean, we all want instant gratification, and so that's raising kids. They don't want to try something unless they're good at it.
Yeah.
Well, and it's a different world, social media and all the things, and I found we naturally too think people are watching us and making fun. I realize most people only care about themselves. So people aren't paying attention to our failures.
Yeah.
I love it when you walk into the room. It's like, I know everybody's looking at me. No, they're not. They're thinking everybody's looking at me.
Everyone's looking at me.
You all right. So the one thing you said about your daughters and the transition of kind of thinking, I don't think of it so much as quitting. Years ago, I read this little bitty book by Seth Godin.
Yep.
It was called The Dip.
Okay.
And it was just, have you read it? It's a very simple book, but basically he's like, you have to know the difference between a dip and a cul-de-sac.
Yeah.
And he said, great people push through the dip. So it's like when you take up golf, since we love to play golf, we've played a lot together. You start to play golf and somebody just picks it up and all of a sudden they're like, hey, they're pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, they're
fair.
like, hey, that's like, wow, that's beginners, or like, go to poker. First time I ever played. Oh, I'm actually pretty good. And then the more they play and the more they think about it, then they hit a dip. So they had to make a decision right there because they're going to get really bad. They don't know it's coming, but it's coming. You're going to get really bad. Even if you played a lot, you're going to get really bad.
Yes.
And you have to decide, is this a dip or is this a dead end? Because if it's a dip, I can push through it. But one of the things he talks about is, like he said, I can say I want to be an NFL linebacker or play for the San Diego Padres, starting left field, right? You could say all that. But then you make a decision at some point to say, is that where I'm going to be and where I want to be? Or do I need to make a decision to move? Like you made a decision to move into a different direction because you saw, and I think that's kind of that's an important thing to teach our kids. The difference between a dip and a cul-de-sac. Because like you said,
I like that terminology.
If gymnastics is not the long-term future, maybe she can leverage all that skill she's used into something new that could be something for her to use. But kids are not good at processing long-term.
Right. And I've entered the stage of where I don't know anything as a parent. Yeah.
Of course.
You don't understand that.
Welcome. I think that's
just
a
don't
long
get it.
stage.
And I'm like, you're right. I don't.
You're going to be there for quite a while.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
But it does come back around. Yeah.
Well, I think that is an important lesson. And so with this grit, grit's become a buzzword and everybody don't quit and stick to it. Well, there are times where quitting's okay or the dip if I didn't quit baseball, what would my life have turned out to be? I mean, I don't know. Probably wouldn't have married my wife. Wouldn't have had my children. Wouldn't have gotten the career I got into. And so I think sometimes, but you have to turn the page and then you can apply what you've learned to the new thing. Right? And so, but that's with the children. That's what I'm trying to explain to my daughter. You're not a quitter.
Yeah.
Like you were a great gymnast and you learned a lot of lessons, and let's go and apply that to something else.
Is that what you were saying earlier, that like the ways that we learn how to work hard in one domain in our life can transfer over to another. So the things that she is learning in gymnastics, right, where she may not be an Olympian, but she is learning hard work, discipline, showing up, team stuff, how to treat your body, all those things, then transfer over to other areas in your life. Even if you stop one thing here, you're taking all that learning over here.
For sure.
Yeah.
And
Go ahead.
Well, I just said that. That's why. I mean, wife talked about that. We're like, look, she's like, don't be too hard on her because I'm trying to push her. Hey, you're gonna be a great cheerleader, and so she's like, she's going to practice 5 times a week. She gets done with school, she goes right there, and she practices till 8, comes home, does homework, repeat. And so it's good to be involved. But yes.
Oh yeah. I think that's a big thing for everyone to learn is the difference between. I don't even know if I'd call it quitting. I don't know if I like it. I don't think
we need to know the term.
I know
for
because
that.
it's almost more like a transition.
Yeah.
It's like a new orientation. We're using that word.
Yes.
It's a new orientation.
Yeah.
It's not you're not quitting anything. You're taking everything and now you're transporting it to something new, which is the continuation of part of it into a new thing. And that to me is very different than quitting. When I think of quitting, it's just like, I'm done. I'm not doing anything, right? You took the stuff you learned playing baseball, being drafted, going through all that. I guarantee you all of that stuff has continually shows up in your life, even today.
For sure.
Elements of it that made you what you are.
And I think that's probably where I think the young folks today are people that are new to the job force. And I interview people in my job, and you see them bouncing around from job to job. So they think that they have to love every aspect of everything. And it's more, I think, learning to love something. Like, get up every day and do the best you can and learn from what you're doing. That's then going to help you later on. Is I think the big thing.
It like when we talk about the fruit of the Spirit, right? Which is all these like wonderful things. I wonder if like when we talk about grit is really the fruit of deliberate, consistent work. That means that it's something I can learn, not necessarily something I'm born with. Right. My hunch is that some grit comes naturally for some other folks more than others because of personality factors. But to be able to say, I can do hard things, and here's the deliberate kind of work I'm going to do, the fruit of that spirit, so to speak, becomes grit. Is that a right way of looking at that or not?
I'd agree. I think it's, back in baseball, it used to be like process versus outcome. Are you a process guy or are you an outcome guy? Right? We all want the outcome. But if you're focusing on the process and doing the right things, putting your time in the cage, watching film, getting your reps, well, you may get to the game and you may hit a line drive, right at the center fielder. Well, the outcome is you failed, right? You're 0 for 1. But you did everything you could. Yeah. And so it's more like, all right, if I continue to put the work and do the right things, you're going to get the outcome. And so, yes, I think, and back to your point, I'm a believer that you're born. I think we're all born with some grit, but probably circumstances dictate a lot. Something's innate, but I think I'm a believer that you can grow your grit. All right. At least I want to believe that.
Yeah.
That'd be bad if you couldn't.
That was the question I had: is can you teach it? Can you learn it? Can you develop it?
I think I know personally, like, who you surround yourself with is a big thing. Like, if you're around lazy people, you're naturally going to be lazy. I mean, if you're around people that are smarter than you and more successful than you, you're probably going to ask questions, learn, want to be like them, mimic them. And so I think your surroundings are huge for your ability to grow your grit or shrink your grit.
It's we keep talking golf, but whenever you play with a group of guys that are way better than you are, you learn things, and you play better. Whenever you play with a group of guys that are way worse than you are, you descend into the
pit of hell.
All of a sudden.
Is that because you're watching, because other folks are helping you? Like, what is that dynamic?
I don't know what the mentality. I think when you're around better golfers, you're kind of wanting to play up because you don't want to be maybe embarrassed or. I mean, I don't know. I mean, you only can do what you can do, right? So, but there's a line like. There's kind of like the highest you're able to perform, something in that psychologically allows you to tap into that a little more. Whereas if there's hackers dribbling it down the fairway every 20 yards and you're sitting in the cart going, this is going to be a long day, then all of a sudden you lose some focus. You're not, I don't know. It's
probably the iron sharpens iron, or success breeds success, or maybe you don't want to lose $20 and have to tell your wife.
Well, all of those.
What was that Venmo?
To a charity.
Don't worry about it.
Don't put gambling.
A golf charity. Yeah. There's a lot of golf charities here.
So Matt, you brought up something, and I think it's good. So you said, can grit sometimes hurt you in other areas of life? And I've had some guests that were tremendous in their professional lives, but struggled personally. And I think that's natural. Right? Sometimes when you're so laser focused on one thing, something else is going to be lacking. And so while someone was putting all their time and effort into being the best they could at their craft, I'm not going to say his name, but got married 4 or 5 times. A lot of marriages. And so I think that can happen.
Yeah. So grit is, grit is a neutral in terms of like the overall character of a human being, right? But what might really produce something beautiful in one part of your life, you're not using that same thing to stick in with other maybe spiritual or
But you could. Grit's amoral. It's like money.
Right.
It's like money in and of itself is not good or evil. It's like, but what you do with it.
Yeah.
And I think grit's the same way.
Right,
I mean, if you have grit, then you can become the greatest baseball player of all time, and your personal relationships are horrible.
Yes.
Because you're not applying the same focused principles.
That's right.
Resilience in that area of your life.
Yeah.
And it's you're prioritizing something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's where the Gritmen's interesting, because you create a term, like it's not in the dictionary. And so it's a good name for a podcast and played into my personal story. But people ask what it's about. I'm trying to define that Gritmen. What is a man of grit? And so it's, I'm trying to take the good aspects, but it's like awareness is something like, hey, look around, notice people, get a door from some, is there a janitor at your building that cleans? Do you know their name? When you're in conversation, if someone asks you 3 questions, do you at least ask one back? Like if I'm playing golf, if I have to get 18 pins and the other guy doesn't get one, I mean, you don't have to get 9, but I mean, there's just little things you need to have some awareness.
Yeah.
You talked about working the process. That's a big Nick Saban thing.
Love Saban.
For Nick Saban, Alabama, whether you love or hate Alabama, I have learned to really appreciate Nick Saban. I used to think he was Nick Satan because, I'm from Georgia.
Nick Satan.
But when I've heard a lot of interviews and stuff with him, and he seems like a very pleasant, wonderful guy, but he's all about process, not outcome. Process. And if you do the right process, in the gym, if you do what you're supposed to do and you do your tape and you watch what you're going to do, then you're going to end up being. So I think that's one of the reasons why the best athletes gravitate to him, is because they have grit. They just need some guidance and control, and he's teaching them process. And hopefully that carries on. But he's even said many times that he wants that to carry on into other areas of these young men's life. And that's what I've grown to appreciate. He's developing men. Is the way he sees it. He's not just out to win national championships.
Right.
There's more to him than that. And that's, you can see these videos of him out on the lake in his boat, and he's got all the players with him on his boat. He becomes like a dad to him. He wants to model something more than the football game. And I think that process. You said something earlier about, especially I think it's related to young people. And I think one of the things we've been talking about here is a huge mental health crisis with young people. Coming out of COVID, everything going on, social media, instant gratification versus delay. I found an article where one guy says, this is his 2 cents, one of the biggest indicators of grit, he says in research, is the ability to delay gratification while working on your task. To understand instant gratification versus the delay it. And that goes back to your process where you were working in the cage or where you're doing film and then you hit it to the center fielder. Well, there's not instant gratification for the work you put in. But then you go back and you keep doing the work.
Yeah. And I mean, I think
That's
it's
interesting.
It's learning to love all the little everyday things. Like one of my favorite movies is Lonesome Dove. Read the book in college, Larry McMurtry. He was a professor at Rice, but then produced the miniseries. But there's a part where Gus, who's played by Robert Duvall, and he's older, and he's actually kind of courting this younger girl, Lori Darling, who's played by Diane Lane. And all Diane Lane wants to do is get to San Francisco. And he's like, look, Lori Darling, he's like the old wise guy, but he's still trying to get with her. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. But he's like, San Francisco is just another town. And when you get there, whatever problems you have right now, you're going to have when you get there.
That's right.
He's like, you got to learn to love all the everyday things, like a warm glass of buttermilk, a feisty young gentleman like myself. Anyway, and it's true. Like, hey, let's find some joy. Let's find something in this moment that I can appreciate. No one wants to be around someone that's grumpy.
Yeah.
I mean, I like people that are happy, optimistic.
So another thing this guy wrote, which I think is interesting, I'm interested in your thoughts on this, is he said that social media provides young people with an instant hit of gratification, a like, a this or that or whatever, and that...
Or rejection.
or it could be
right.
negative.
Yeah.
And so that the social media gives these quick bursts of positive or negative reinforcement. But on the positive side, do you think some of that stuff takes away from, do you see young people today not having grit, say maybe your generation or the generation before us?
So I don't even know what I am, 41 years old, so I think I'm around the edge of millennial.
I didn't realize you was so young. I should have said
Wow.
my generation, and then your generation, and then the generation before me.
I can, whatever you need me to be. I can be as young or old as you need me to be, John. But like me, I'm sure growing up, I got left out of all kind of things. Right? Like I wasn't invited to the party or the birthday, but I didn't know about it because no one posted on Instagram or Twitter. I didn't.
Look where you're not.
Right. I didn't know, so I didn't get my feelings hurt.
Yeah.
But today it's totally different, and I mean it's a big deal. Just watching, my son's a little special needs, and so he's different. But my daughter, I mean, and girls can be so mean to each other, especially 8th grade girls.
Oh yeah.
And so I think there's some good. I don't think a lot. I think the bad's probably outweighs the good, though. If you're asking me my opinion on social media.
Yeah, okay, I get that. I mean, it's. I just think I think delayed gratification is an issue for everybody in our culture. I mean, how many times have you gone through the fast food drive-through and it's not fast enough?
Right.
You're still not getting out of your car. I mean, it's like you had to make a fresh batch of fries and take an extra, minute.
Right.
I mean, I think it's just a cultural thing. We don't have patience. That's the other thing I think too about grit. Is the patience to watch things grow. I keep going back to when you talking about working the process. I mean, you probably were not the player. Like, you can go back and look and see, okay, the kind of player you were, say, freshman in high school, junior in high school, freshman in college, and then in 2003, when you're on this national championship. I mean, you weren't the same player every year. You probably could even go back and chart noticeable improvement.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, for sure.
And it goes back to me, I'm thinking the process is you learned that the gratification comes through a long period of, because you've been there, you've done it.
Yeah, and I don't know where that came from. I liked probably a little bit of my parents, grandparents. I mean, I've always appreciated older people and asking them questions, understanding their story. And I think that's maybe what's been lost because, yes, we want it right now. And it's a problem. Like you said, watch something grow. Like a new passion of mine is farming. Don't laugh at me yet. Farming's hard.
Yeah. But
Trust me, I have a tomato garden. It's hard, especially in Houston when it gets 110 degrees outside.
Right. But I mean, in my line of work, some days I don't know if I've went forward or backwards. But I mean, I can go home and see if your tomato turned a little green to a little red. Right. I mean, but it's
or it even made any tomatoes at all.
Right. Or a bird ate it or something. Yeah. I mean, but anyway, I'm not answering your question, but I really think that people need something that reconnects them to like the way things used to be. I mean, technology is great. I love it. And it gets into the grit story. Like if you trace our ancestors far back enough or genealogy, I mean, there was a farmer in there. There was a hunter. There was somebody that had to get up and walk, miles to find food or grow their own food. And so me and my son have taken on a project of trying to farm. We bought some land between Chapel Hill and Brenham, and we're going to be the worst farmers ever. It's going to be the most expensive corn if any comes out of the ground. But we're spending time together and we're learning. And
that's great.
Yeah, but it's
good.
I think man should plow some dirt and put some seeds in
Talk
the ground.
Talk about delayed gratification.
Yeah.
That's right.
I think that was the
there you go.
culture.
That's why that popped in my head.
It fits. See, you knew it, you were making the connection.
I'm a farmer.
It's delayed gratification, and it's like when you put those plants in the ground, there are things that in order for them to do well, there are things you have to do.
Yeah.
And you got to be disciplined to be able to go back and do that. And if you ignore it, they'll grow, get crazy, might not produce as much as they would. Have you taken better care of them? Corn, I don't know so much about, but
Well,
I like it. I like corn.
Hey, well, I'm gonna put y'all on the spot since y'all are, know more about it. So faith, I think, is a parallel, right? Like,
It's like, what a great segue. He
Okay.
could,
Look
he
at
could
you.
host a
Look at you.
podcast.
Come on, you ought to be a podcaster.
You should.
you're not always gonna get. You pray that prayer. It may get answered. It may not. And so I think that is where some people get off in religion too, and relationship with is like, give it to me now. And but I would think it's more about the journey and relationship. But I'd love to get y'all's thoughts on that.
We've been talking about this. Of course, we're getting ready to enter into a season of Lent,
Yep.
which is a season of fasting, 40 days before Easter, and it's designed to kind of strip things away, right? You fast from something, you deny yourself something significant, right? Why? To self-denial, to try to focus yourself more on your spiritual life or whatever it is that you decide that you're working on, but particularly to prepare you for Easter. And I think that I think that's interesting because I was thinking in terms of how faith and grit, tenacity, resiliency, the Bible uses the word endurance. Suffering
perseverance.
produces endurance.
Jesus had grit.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure he could have created a miracle where he didn't have to suffer when he was being crucified.
Well, he said I could call
10,000
the angels down, if I wanted to. But, I mean, he knew what he had to go through.
Well, look how he came into the world.
And he didn't want to go through it.
He wasn't born in the Ritz-Carlton.
A stinky manger.
That's right. Yeah, and I wonder if the spiritual practices are about that too. Like you had correlated kind of awareness with grit, and that the spiritual practices are to make us aware of how we're living, right? They expose kind of either the ego kind of projects we're involved in or the ways that we're avoiding things. And so I think the spiritual practices, and Lent does that, like John was saying, like puts us in a place of awareness where we can say, one of the Psalms talks about, search me, O God, and know me. Right, so we intentionally put ourselves in a place of that space of saying, I want to know myself and why I do the things I don't want to do, or what are the things I'm doing that really are bearing fruit in this world in a different way. And I think spiritual practices allow us to do that. So it is much more process than it is outcome. I think we take care of the process, and the outcome is what it is. That's in God's hands.
Yeah, the last thing before we close is obstacles that get in the way. And someone I read said that grit is also tied into how you view and deal with obstacles that get in your way. It kind of reveals, like, some people, obstacles crop up and they quit. Sometimes obstacles crop up and they become the victim, like, it's not my fault, woe is me, this happened to me, versus the tenacity or the endurance or the grit, if you will, that looks at an obstacle or a problem and sees it in a different way, an opportunity. I learned from an old mentor of mine, and I say this whenever anybody walks in, they don't say it much anymore, but if anybody ever walks in to my office or whatever and says, hey, we got a problem, I immediately say, no, we have an opportunity.
Right.
And it's not my line, but I've loved it and have used it. And it always usually makes people smile for a minute and they go, no, we really have a problem. But I am how we deal with adversity, because everybody's going to deal with the disorientation. Everybody's going to deal with adversity. Everybody's going to have trials and tribulations. And I'm sure in your career, when you were playing ball, you probably had some moments or some obstacles or some trials where you thought you weren't going to get on the other side of it.
Yeah, there's slumps in baseball. There's slumps in marriage. There's slumps in parent. I mean, that you go through that, and so I don't know. I mean, there just seems to be such a victim mentality in society today that I've been wronged or I've been harmed or somebody treated me the wrong way, which maybe is true. But I think a characteristic of grit or grit man or a grit woman is that you take accountability. Okay, what could I have done? I could have done something better there.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, or maybe was it my words that made your spouse or somebody respond the way? And it's not always easy. Right? It's hard to do that. But if you've read any of Jocko's stuff,
Yeah.
That's one of his big deals is personal accountability.
Personal accountability.
And like whenever, even if it's not his fault as a leader, you'd say, you know what, I failed you. I could have done this better. Instead of being the first one to say, like, it's your fault.
That's right. Extreme.
Right.
What does he call it? Extreme ownership.
Extreme ownership. There you go. Yep.
I think there's a lot to be said about that mentality, and because that's another thing. I sound like the old grandpa now. It's like these kids these days.
We do have gray hair.
But I did the same. Thank you, appreciate it. I do. Talking of the hair, though, we have the three stages of.
It's
I will
The 3 stages.
talk about quitting.
Mine's gray, but at least it's still there. But I think that. Yeah, what were we talking?
I quit and focused my attention elsewhere.
This takes all
I
my
think
time.
I think the ownership.
You know, product in that is that
don't-
natural? That's nice.
I'm farming hair.
He's farming.
John, keep going.
No,
Yeah, sorry.
No, that's fine. It's okay. We're about done. I do think that we always say, well, kids these days they don't have, they all think they're victims or whatever else. I thought that when I was a kid.
Right.
When I was a teenager,
This ain't fair.
everything else was somebody else's fault.
Yeah.
It was never my fault.
Yes.
I think it's a maturity thing. I don't
Yes.
think it's a today's kids thing.
Right.
I know some adults who had never grown out of
Never
that.
figured that out. Yeah.
They're always the victim for everything. And you're never going to have any, you're never going to experience grit to be able to make progress in your life in any beneficial way if you're always the victim, I think. Even when sometimes you are the victim, there's still ways that you can learn and see what's my part in this, I think.
Yeah, I mean, look, life's not fair. I mean, if you're looking for fairness, it's probably not going to happen.
Yeah, that's true. So you're going to start season 2. If you haven't checked out, go look for Gritmen.
Gritmen
Chris
Show, look
Kolkhorst.
for our buffalo, yes.
Yep, there's the logo on the buffalo, and you can find it on your streaming podcast.
Do you have like T-shirts and all
Stuff.
that cool stuff?
Not yet. I mean, so
When you do that, I'll
you
wear
won't
it.
have hats. I can get you a hat.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a cool logo. So,
That's sweet.
No, yeah, it's a buffalo.
yeah.
I think that's a great logo.
Well, the
Gritmen.
parallel is that if you research the buffalo, there was like 60 million, and then they got down to like 593
Yeah.
through disease and overhunting, and
Yeah.
but that was the parallel to grit. Like, I think it's a character trait that could be on the endangered species list if we don't promote it. So there you go. That's the story of the buffalo.
That's
Nice.
good.
Well, check out Gritmen and Chris, and you're starting out back a new second season soon.
Season 2 should be coming out soon, so
All
give it a
right,
listen.
Good. Yeah, that's awesome.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
This
Thanks
has
so
been
much for
fun.
being
We've been
here.
meaning to
Great.
do this for a while, and I'm glad it worked out. And the timing was great because we've been talking exactly about some of this stuff with resiliency as well.
Well, good.
Glad you're here, man.
Yep. Thanks a lot.
Do you want some Valentine's cupcakes?
Yes. Well, I did since I went to work out this
You went to
morning.
F3
I think
this
I
morning.
burned a few calories, so yes.
Well, I'm John Stevens,
I'm Matt Russell.
Chris Kolkhorst.
and this is Pod Have Mercy.